One, gates don't open by accident. She walked through the gates just like she always did. No fuss, no hesitation. A nurse in standard NHS scrubs with a work bag on her shoulder and a security pass clipped to her chest. It was a regular morning at HMP Lindholme, a Category C prison on the outskirts of Doncaster. The time, around 8:15 a.m. morning checks were done. Security cameras were sweeping. Officers were pouring their first cup of tea. Nothing out of the ordinary, until everything changed. Just minutes later, right outside the mental health wing, she was stopped. Not by inmates, not by patients, but by her own colleagues, only this time from security. The internal corruption team had been watching her, quietly, methodically, long enough to know what to look for. Amy Hatfield, 38 years old, a registered mental health nursing assistant employed by the NHS, was politely asked to accompany them, not for a meeting, not for a routine check-in, for a search. Standard, they said. But this one wasn't random. The first item they pulled from her bag, 4 bottles of Ribena, children's juice on the surface. But not this time. The caps had been resealed. The contents inside were thick, chemical, synthetic. Lab results would later confirm it was liquid spice, high potency, undiluted, roughly 2 liters, enough for over 100,000 doses once processed and distributed through the prison. And that was just the beginning. Also in her bag, foil-wrapped packets of powdered MDMA, small plastic vials filled with ketamine, several bottles of anabolic steroids, 4 mobile phones, including one disguised as a power bank, tobacco pouches laced with shredded paper soaked in synthetic drugs, and in the side pocket, a carbon-bladed knife invisible to X-ray scanners. This wasn't her first drop, not even close. According to law enforcement, the street value of the contents she was caught with exceeded £250,000, but considering the full scope of what she had allegedly smuggled over months, the value was estimated closer to £1 million. Amy didn't resist. She didn't argue. Footage showed her simply lowering her head and nodding. In that moment, she knew. HMP Lindholme, once considered a model facility, had just become the epicenter of one of the most sophisticated internal drug trafficking operations the UK prison system had ever seen. And the first thread that investigators pulled wasn't a gang tattoo. It wasn't a riot. It wasn't even a phone tap. It was a nurse in a white uniform carrying 4 innocent-looking bottles of Ribena. Within the hour, she was suspended. Within the day, arrested. Within the week, the headlines began. But no one, not even the officers who first stopped her, understood the scale. Not how many people were already dead. Not how deep the network ran. Not how far trust could be weaponized. Amy Hatfield wasn't a criminal. At least no one saw her that way. Born and raised in South Yorkshire, she joined the prison service from the public health sector. She had worked countless shifts in psychiatric wards and was hired as a mental health nursing assistant. Someone trained to support inmates battling depression, psychosis, trauma, and suicide risk. She didn't treat diagnoses. She helped keep people from falling off the edge. Colleagues spoke well of her. Calm, polite, dependable. No one could have imagined she would become the key courier in a high-level drug pipeline, smuggling narcotics straight into the heart of a British prison. But everything changed in late 2018 when she crossed paths with one inmate, Joseph Whittingham, 35 years old, serving a lengthy sentence for serious offenses. On paper, just another prisoner. In reality, someone different. Polished, soft-spoken, respectful. The kind of man who knew how to charm, especially when it mattered. An internal investigation later confirmed what staff had suspected too late. Amy and Joseph weren't just patient and caregiver. They were involved, intimately, romantically. It started with glances, then conversations, then routine medical visits that lasted longer than they should have. All of it took place within the very wing she was assigned to. On camera, nothing looked unusual. Just standard checkups, medical logs, paper trails. But behind closed doors, something else was unfolding. They were meeting regularly, alone. Their relationship had crossed the line In the UK prison system, any personal involvement between staff and inmates is strictly prohibited. Not just unethical, but a direct threat to safety and security, and yet no one intervened, not in time. The text came next. On smuggled phones, they exchanged flirtatious messages and, eventually, intimate photos. Amy called him mine forever. Joseph replied with logistics: what to bring, how much, when to deliver. Their affair turned into supply. Affection turned into smuggling. Later, when Amy was interrogated after her arrest, she didn't deny it. "I fell in love with him," she said. "I never meant for it to go this far." But police records showed otherwise. For over 6 months, Amy Hatfield had been carrying in drugs, burner phones, vape pens filled with narcotics, and even weapons. And she wasn't doing it for free. She was being paid, sometimes in cash, sometimes through bank transfers sent by relatives of inmates. £1,000 per drop, sometimes more. She became the primary entry point for a prison-wide operation, and Joseph Whittingham, the command center. From that moment on, the network began to grow. New names, new routes, new tricks. Amy didn't raise her voice, didn't use force. She didn't even look suspicious. But she was the door, and all it took to open it was trust, a uniform, and a quiet smile from a woman who was supposed to heal. Joseph Whittingham wasn't just a smooth-talking inmate. He was an organizer, a strategist, a central hub from which a network of connections branched out across and beyond prison walls. On the surface, he looked like anyone else doing time. But on the inside, he was building something more. A drug trafficking operation that ran with the precision of a logistics firm. At the core of that network was Amy Hatfield. She was the pipeline. Her official role allowed her access to secure blocks. Her routine medical visits gave her cover. Her presence raised no suspicion. And every time she stepped into Joseph's wing, she wasn't just bringing conversation, she was delivering product. The drops were masked as care, scheduled mental health sessions, justified in paperwork, signed off as clinical necessity. But what really entered the room was MDMA, ketamine, spice in liquid form, paper sheets soaked in synthetics, steroids, and even, on one occasion, a knife. Their primary smuggling method: bottles of Ribena juice, sealed to appear untouched. Inside, thick narcotic fluid, hidden in plain sight among medical supplies in her bag. As an NHS staff member, Amy wasn't subject to the same level of searches as regular officers. That loophole became the gateway. Once inside, the spice was dried, cut into strips, and distributed through the prison in envelopes, fake legal letters, books, and personal effects. A single bottle could yield thousands of pounds in product. Every drop she delivered became a high-yield batch for internal sale. On the prison black market, one sheet of soaked paper could fetch 50 pounds. One bottle, up to 15,000 pounds. And Whittingham wasn't doing it alone. His key associates included Jordan Needham, an inmate with prior drug smuggling convictions. He helped move product between wings. Kieran Murphy took charge of weapons. He organized shipments of carbon-bladed knives with help from his mother, Deborah Stoddard, who purchased them online and disguised them as Amazon deliveries. Anthony Campbell managed cash flow and records. He tracked who owed what, who paid, and where the money went. Outside the walls, Whittingham's wife, Lucy, managed the transfers. Transactions were often made through friends, siblings, or fake names. Frequently, women used to obscure the financial trail. Some transfers came in cash. Others were moved through online crypto wallets like Coinbase and Binance. Police would later uncover layers of digital laundering that spanned dozens of transactions and burner accounts. There were also mules, low-level couriers tasked with passing items to Amy or dropping them at handoff points. Some were paid as little as £200 to carry small packages, unaware of the total picture. Others were fully involved, helping source substances, set up financial channels, or sanitize records. The entire network operated in cells. No one saw the whole board, but each part moved in sync. Amy was the access point. Whittingham was the nerve center. Everyone else, hands, feet, and silence. They didn't use force. They didn't incite riots. Their power was in subtlety, in knowing the system, in using trust as their strongest weapon. While guards focused on violent inmates, disciplinary cases, and routine security sweeps, the real threat walked in and out every morning, smiling, clipboard in hand, a bottle of Ribena tucked neatly in her bag. For a long time, the operation ran quietly. No violence, no fights, no obvious chaos. But the most dangerous systems rarely announce themselves. They grow in silence, slowly, efficiently, until the damage is irreversible. That's how Joseph Whittingham's network operated. Out of sight, under the radar, and dangerously effective. HMP Lindholme wasn't known for violence. As a Category C facility, it housed inmates approaching release or rehabilitation, not high-risk offenders. That's what made it the perfect environment. No one expected a smuggling ring worth hundreds of thousands to thrive behind those walls. But inside, the signs were mounting. Spice was everywhere, in liquid form when it entered, processed and cut into strips once inside. The synthetic fluid was soaked into paper, dried, and passed between inmates inside books, chessboards, even hollowed-out Bibles. Each slip was a hit, enough to send a man into euphoria or into convulsions. From 2018 to 2019, prison staff recorded at least 7 serious medical incidents linked to spice overdoses. 2 inmates were placed in medically induced comas. One lost his sight permanently. Another suffered long-term paralysis. In one case, the chemical formula in a bottle seized from Amy's bag matched substances recovered from a victim's breathing tube. The most tragic case came in September 2019. Kyle Batsford, a 28-year-old inmate, was found dead in his cell. Toxicology confirmed synthetic cannabinoid intoxication. While the court couldn't prove a direct connection to the smuggled items, police listed his death as highly probable to be linked to Whittingham's network. Spice didn't just sedate inmates, it dismantled them. Psychosis, muscle failure, seizures, hallucinations. For some, it was a means of escape from anxiety, isolation, or trauma. For others, it was fatal, but the demand never stopped. Inside prison, a hit of spice could be worth more than a week's food rations. Some inmates offered up clothes, privileges, or favors just for one more sheet. Even those who didn't use were still affected. Debts, threats, silent coercion. The drug created a parallel economy inside the walls, built on desperation and addiction. And Whittingham's network was the supplier. No shouting, no blood, just overdoses, ambulance runs, psychological breakdowns. 5. Underwatch. The network that Whittingham built from the inside and Amy sustained from the outside couldn't stay invisible forever. Eventually, something gave. Not the scheme itself, but the attention it drew. In early 2019, prison staff started to notice a pattern, a spike in overdoses, sudden blackouts, inmates collapsing in the same block, repeatedly. Quietly, an internal alert was triggered. No alarms, no panic, just surveillance. Amy Hatfield first raised subtle red flags when one officer noticed her increasingly frequent visits to a specific housing unit, the one where Joseph Whittingham was held. She wasn't assigned there regularly, but the visits kept happening, all of them logged as mental health checks. But every time it was the same inmate, just one. By June 2019, the prison anti-corruption unit was brought in. Headed by detectives Gareth Gent and Scott Jarvis, the team moved quickly. Hidden cameras were installed, visitor records were pulled, schedules were cross-checked. Everything Amy did was now under a microscope. At first, there was nothing overt. No clear signs of smuggling, just routine, until one camera caught something odd. A session that was supposed to last 15 minutes stretched into 40. And when Amy left the room, she adjusted her clothes in a way that seemed off. That moment became the catalyst. Financial checks came next. Police began mapping Whittingham's known associates. Small payments, £50, £100, £200, were being funneled through accounts belonging to women with no obvious connection to him. Several deposits coincided with Amy's scheduled work shifts. By September, surveillance moved beyond the prison. A warrant was issued to monitor Amy's movements outside of work. Over 2 weeks, officers documented her meeting with several individuals in parks, parking lots, and pubs. One of those men would later be identified as Jordan Needham. Then came the meeting that changed everything. On the evening of October 21st, Amy left her house and drove to a small pub just outside Doncaster. She stayed only 15 minutes, long enough to be seen accepting a plastic bag from an unidentified man. After that, she went straight home. 3 days later, she showed up for work at HMP Lindholme. It was Friday, October 24th, the day she was stopped. The search appeared random, but it wasn't. The security team knew exactly what they were looking for. They took apart her bag piece by piece, and there it was. Bottles of Ribena filled with synthetic cannabinoids, vials of ketamine, packets of MDMA, steroids, burner phones, and a hidden blade. Amy didn't argue, didn't plead. Security footage shows her lower her eyes and nod slightly. During her first interview, she said just one thing. "I knew it would happen eventually." But Amy was only the beginning. From her phone, officers extracted text messages, selfies, call logs, and encrypted chats, photos of drugs, coordinates, drop instructions. But the message that stood out most came from Joseph himself. "If this one gets through, we double next week. Jordan's still got more." With that, investigators had their map, and it ran far deeper than they ever expected. After Amy Hatfield's arrest, everything accelerated. Investigators were no longer observing, they were executing. Her seized phone, along with decrypted WhatsApp messages, became a roadmap. Every name, every location, every coded phrase. Piece by piece, the network unfolded. The goal was simple: expose the full depth of the operation. What they found was staggering. Within days, a multi-agency operation was launched. On the morning of October 30th, raids were carried out at 11 locations across South Yorkshire, Manchester, and Birmingham. The first arrest, Joseph Whittingham, taken from his prison cell at HMP Lindholme. Inside his cell, officers recovered 2 mobile phones hidden in the air vent, a SIM card cut in half, and a notebook filled with cryptic initials and numbers. It wasn't journaling, it was accounting. Next came Jordan Needham, suspected of supplying batches of spice and coordinating with Amy outside prison. He was arrested at his home in Sheffield. Officers found packing materials, empty Ribena bottles, vacuum-sealed bags, and 4,200 pounds in cash stored in a shoebox. On his encrypted phone, investigators found messages referring to Psych, Whittingham's nickname for Amy. Kieran Murphy, responsible for smuggling weapons, was detained days later. His mother, Deborah Stoddard, had helped him purchase carbon-bladed knives and shipped them disguised as Amazon packages. One delivery was addressed to a fake prison officer working at Lindholme. Anthony Campbell, believed to be the network's financial handler, was arrested after investigators uncovered suspicious transactions on his accounts. He had been managing deposits from unknown sources and filtering them through various intermediaries. One of those intermediaries, Lucy Whittingham, Joseph's wife. She was also arrested and charged with laundering criminal proceeds, and the arrests kept coming. In total, 17 individuals were taken into custody during the operation. Among them, 3 serving inmates, including Whittingham, Needham, and Murphy, 2 prison staff, Amy, and 1 additional insider under investigation, multiple women who acted as money movers, drop facilitators, or romantic accomplices, 2 external couriers, and a supplier of packaging and concealment tools. Each had a role. Some ran cash, some handled crypto, some coordinated deliveries. Others simply kept their mouths shut. The evidence was overwhelming. Officers seized 11 mobile phones, including a device with dual operating systems, 3 knives, handwritten ledgers marked with prison ID numbers, quantities of spice, MDMA, ketamine, and steroids, a USB stick containing instructions on how to manufacture synthetic spray drugs. But the most damning piece? An audio recording found on a voice-activated device at one of the suspects' homes. In it, Amy's voice can be clearly heard. "I brought 2. Joseph said not to do more. Didn't want to draw heat." The recording was a turning point, a direct admission, proof that Amy wasn't coerced. She wasn't manipulated. She knew exactly what she was doing, and the scheme was far from small time. Some suspects confessed early, others lawyered up. But one thing was clear: Whittingham's operation wasn't a rogue hustle. It was a system, built deliberately, run like a business. By mid-2023, the investigation concluded. The official case file spanned over 4,000 pages, more than 100 hours of surveillance footage, and over 3 terabytes of digital evidence. HMP Lindholme was no longer a prison in crisis. It was a crime scene with uniforms, and 17 people had turned it into a marketplace, built not with violence but with charm, routine, and access. Amy Hatfield, 38, sentenced to 10 years and 2 months in prison, convicted on 5 counts: conspiracy to supply Class A and B drugs, possession of unauthorized items in prison, phones, knives, and laundering criminal property. Joseph Whittingham, 35, sentenced to 11 years and 4 months. As the ringleader, his influence and orchestration earned him the harshest sentence. Jordan Needham, 9 years and 6 months. Anthony Campbell, 11 years. Kieran Murphy, 7 years and 9 months. In 2018, she walked into that prison wearing a white coat and an NHS badge. By 2023, she was walking out, in cuffs flanked by guards. She said she meant to help, that she fell in love, that she lost control. He never said a word. He used her the same way he used others, with silence, calculation, and no regret. But this case was never just about love. It was about access, about routine, about how trust can be turned into currency and weaponized. HMP Lindholme still stands. Inmates come and go. The cameras still roll. The gates still open. But no one looks at a nurse the same way. And that's the real tragedy. Not just for a prison, but for a system built on human contact. We like stories with heroes, but sometimes the darkest truths come when the hero and the criminal are the same person. And the line between care and betrayal is no thicker than a strip of paper soaked in spice. What do you think about this case? Was Amy Hatfield a manipulated victim or a knowing participant? Can a system like this ever fully protect itself from the inside? Let us know in the comments and subscribe, because this won't be the last case we uncover. According to a Ministry of Justice report, the level of organized drug movement inside Lindholme matched that of external, high-level trafficking groups. The prison had effectively become a delivery hub, not through gang warfare, but through corruption and routine. And it all worked, until one search, one bag, one woman in a white uniform,